Welcome to the Digital Hive podcast, where we talk all things digital marketing. I'm Emma, a marketing strategist and coach for business owners who aren't short on ideas, but want support with the strategy and tactics to get their message out into the world. Today, I'm chatting with Andrea Stenberg all about video and marketing and how to keep it authentic to your brand. As a video marketing strategist, Andrea shows coaches, course creators, and other heart centered entrepreneurs how to show off their unique brilliance and connect with their ideal clients using video. Hi, Andrea. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Emma. Thanks for inviting me.
So good to chat. So, the big question to start us off, tell us about you and your business.
Well, I am a video marketing strategist, but I kind of came to it. I was dragged kicking and screaming to doing video. I started my business in 2005 before there was online video. So I was doing traditional marketing. And then I gradually transitioned into helping my clients with social media. And around 2018, I was like, I could see the writing on the wall that video was coming and it was going to be essential. And I thought, I better figure it out for me so that I can advise my clients. So 2018, my number one business goal that year was to make more videos for my business. And can you guess how many videos I made that year? I think I did 3 all year.
Yeah, I was literally about to say
Yeah.
3.
And it was for exactly the same reason nobody wants to make video is the technology intimidated the heck out of me. I think the first time I went to edit a video, I came this close to throwing my computer out the window because I was so frustrated. I hated how I looked on camera, hated my voice, and I didn't really know what I was supposed to be talking about on video anyway. So, went a whole year. At the end of that year, I was kind of beating myself going, "Oh, Andrea, you're so stupid. Why aren't you doing video?" And then, January comes around and somebody I followed on Instagram had an ad for a course that they were running. It was like, you're going to go live every day for 30 days and learn all the things. And I'm like, I think there was smoke as I whipped my credit card out of my wallet. I pulled it out so fast, signed up for this course, and then was absolutely devastated to learn that this course was a PDF with 30 topics and a hashtag to use. So, yeah, I was not happy. But anyway, I actually did follow it. I went 28 out of 30 days. One of the days I was trying to go live and Instagram had crashed. So I would have been 29 out of 30. But at the end, so I got over my fear. I got over all this stuff, but I still didn't know, there was no strategy behind it. So I spent, 2019 trial and error. I spent a lot of time. I was very un-Canadian and started calling people up and saying, you're doing interesting things, talk to me, and that sort of thing. And so at the end of 2019, I was starting to, figure it out, get some traction. But that so-called course that I'd signed up for kept niggling at the back of my mind. And then all of a sudden one day I woke up and went, Andrea, you've been doing online training for people since 2010, back when there were teleseminars. And I thought, why don't I create the course that I was looking for, that I was wanting, that I was needing? And so that's what I did is I just put in kind of everything that I had needed and wished I'd had. And that's kind of how I transitioned into doing video marketing, is trying to do the stuff that teach people the stuff that I wish I'd known when I started.
In doing that, what did you find throughout the process was the thing that video was kind of doing for you? Obviously, you were learning this new thing, but what was the video achieving for you?
Well, I mean, it does a bunch of different things, but I think one of the things, when you're a coach, a healer, some kind of heart-centered entrepreneur, where you kind of have to have a really strong relationship with your clients, it's who you are as much as what you know. Video lets people kind of virtually look you in the eye before you've ever got on Zoom or got on a phone call or even sent them an email, and they get a taste of what it might be like to work with you. I've actually had clients say to me, I watched a bunch of your videos and I could imagine myself working with you. And that's what video does. And it's not the only thing you can do. If you're a really talented copywriter, you can do it with writing, but not all of us are talented copywriters, but all of us can talk.
Yeah, totally. And there's also a thing of sometimes when you're writing, for me, that's an edited version of me, whereas this version is obviously I've prepared for this, but in the same way that I would prepare for a coaching call. So it's still me. We're having a conversation in a way that isn't, forced in any way. So you get to know me and you can get a lot more comfortable with just being yourself and using your voice and speaking when you're doing video. And especially if you're doing it regularly, the 3 videos a year isn't necessarily going to like break the friction of doing it. You've got your setup, you've hit the button. And also when Instagram does something like they go down, you're like, okay, no, this is just par for the course. Or Instagram moves where the button is, you're just more adept to like figuring it out because you've been doing it more regularly.
Well, and also like, you know, I'm a menopausal woman. Sometimes my hair goes crazy, sometimes my skin goes berserk. And instead of being totally paralyzed by the fact that I don't look perfect, whatever that means, I kind of gotten over myself a little bit. That being said, like I'm wearing lipstick, I'm wearing concealer. I don't go on Zoom without concealer ever, but I'm not so precious about myself anymore because I've kind of gotten used to it a little bit. Like I still wish that, I didn't look like I'm almost 60, but it's like I am. So this is who I am. So, but yeah, the more you do it, the more comfortable you get. If I forget something, instead of going, "Oh my god, I forgot something," I'm like, "Ooh, next video."
You also, in the repeating of the process, you realize how other people are like doing it. They're just doing the exact same thing as you. So they're able to show up. If you show up consistently, you can have, there are obviously differences, but like you can feel some of the same momentum as other people and you might see other people doing. I saw recently it was like the Met Gala or something, and someone had shared the untouched, like this is what people's skin actually looks like. Just not as a way to tear down celebrities, but as a way of like, this is what real skin looks like. Let's stop pretending that everyone has like perfect glassy skin. And I was like, oh, what an adjustment for people that we're coming back to. This is what everyone's face look like, because of course they're getting the treatments that none of the rest of us can afford, and they're getting the best makeup, but they still have texture to their skin and things like that. It's all just more real.
Well well, or even when I was in high school, I dated a boy whose sister was a cover like, she was literally on the cover of Italian Vogue, and if you saw her day to day, she was quite plain and ordinary, but when the makeup and the hair and the designer clothes, and she looked like she should be on the cover of Italian Vogue. So yeah, like nobody looked, even those people don't look like those people.
Yeah, exactly. Interesting though that she was kind of like a canvas for like different artists to do their things. Yeah. So, in terms of why business owners should at least try video, do you have any, tried and true stories that you can share with us of either you or your clients who what it has been able to change for them and how they look at their marketing?
Yeah, well, I have there was one client of mine who she's a coach, and she was building her practice on the side while she was still working. And she was really resistant to doing video, like just did not want to do it, which was interesting because she's a really excellent speaker. And when she's speaking in person, she was just brilliant, and she did not want to do video. So finally she got persuaded. She said, "All right, I'm going to try. I'm going to make a video and I'm going to upload it to LinkedIn, but I'm not going to keep it there. This is just so I know which buttons to push and I know how to do it." So she recorded a video, uploaded it to LinkedIn. And then I don't know what if the phone rang or somebody came to the door, but anyways, she got distracted and didn't delete the video right away. And then she came back and there was a bunch of people had liked the video, 2 or 3 people had commented, and she was horrified. In fact, she told me later she was really mad that all these people had seen this video because it wasn't perfect. She hadn't done her hair, she hadn't done her makeup. There were a couple of places where she'd stumbled over some of her words. Like it was, she thought this was a trial run. And she was going to delete it anyway. And then she just paused for a second and said, "You know what? I'm going to sleep on it and I'll delete it tomorrow morning." So she went away, came back, and there was a direct message on her LinkedIn from an executive director of an organization whose members were all her ideal clients. And they said, "We were in the process of developing a training program on the topic of your video, and we've decided we're not going to do it anymore. We want to hire you to do this training video for us." So her first less than perfect video landed her a client that well, first of all, gave her money, but second of all, gave her massive credibility because this organization was presenting her as the expert. And I mean, let's face it, getting a major client on one video, that's like the unicorn. That's never going to happen for anybody except, you know, you when you do your marketing, you can control your message and you can control what you put out there. And to some extent, you can control your audience by who the keywords you use, who you're connected to, who you target, but you have no control over who's ready to buy. And so by putting it out there, you never know. Maybe the first one, maybe the 10th one, maybe the 100th one will land for somebody at exactly the right time with the right message. And that's kind of the exciting part about video marketing and marketing in general.
Yeah, totally. I love that even though it was a practice run, that she still had a script and all of those types of things. So like you knew what she was going to talk about. So that wasn't just like, hey guys, I just wanted to jump on here and like do this test and I'm just checking that my computer works or whatever. I'm gonna delete this afterwards. Like she actually spoke because if it had been that, it may not have done the same thing. I mean, somebody may have liked her execution, yeah, but it would have been a little bit different. In terms of that, with that being, LinkedIn, um, how can businesses show up in different places in different formats with their video?
Well, I mean, yes, it definitely is a bit of a difference. Like LinkedIn is more of the professional setting, Facebook is a little more casual. Um, Instagram is sort of in between somewhere. But and different formats sort of work differently. So for example, on Instagram, obviously they're the vertical, videos. But actually LinkedIn, a lot of people are watching LinkedIn on their phones.
Mm.
So if you have a video that you've created, say, an Instagram reel and you've saved it, if the content is right, no reason not to share it on LinkedIn as well. In fact, some of the short Instagram reel style videos are performing really well on LinkedIn. In fact, LinkedIn is testing a vertical video feed for some people. I don't personally have it yet because I'm in Canada. Canada is the unwanted stepchild of social media. We get everything last. But they're testing it out just because so many people are watching it. I wouldn't do some of the dancing videos, which even aren't even really working on Instagram and TikTok anymore, but I wouldn't do those sorts of things on LinkedIn. I would tend to be a little more professional with one caveat. So I've been on LinkedIn back from when it was beta and you had to like get an invite. And in the early days, people were really got irritated if people shared any Facebook type posts with like personal. But a year ago, I'd never done this before, but I posted my anniversary photo that I always put for my wedding anniversary on my LinkedIn. And then about 3 months later, I went and I was looking at my analytics, and that post got 10 times the engagement of any other post that I'd done on LinkedIn. So even on LinkedIn, you can be a little more personal, a little more, a little more yourself. You don't have to be the professional in a suit and all that on LinkedIn if that's not who you are.
Yeah, I think I've noticed a shift, not only in on LinkedIn, but in terms of like people discussing work-life balance, all of these things where people are shifting to more of that like the whole self situation. So it is inherently authentic, but you can also be authentic while not sharing any element of your personal life. But that there is more of a shift of the full person. And I wonder how much of that came about in COVID. Certain offices who maybe always dressed corporate before went back to maybe they're not wearing like tracksuit bottoms into the office like they were at home, but they've gone a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more like the whole package. And then in that, with people being, at home, we kind of accelerated this thing of talking about the whole person and how do we do things differently because people figured out that certain things worked really well and certain things maybe didn't. Kind of like a cultural shift that we maybe would have delayed if we didn't have that kind of situation. But there's a lot of that authenticity that comes through in video, especially when someone can get a little bit more comfortable being on camera and maybe speaking to a lens or speaking to the top of their phone. Um, How can business owners make sure that they're being authentic when they're approaching that video?
Well, I mean, there are a few things for that. And one of the things I like to think about it is think about if you were at an in-person networking event, say your local chamber of commerce. We've all seen that person at a networking event who goes around and just like forces their business card in everybody's hand and just like, hey, buy from me, buy from me. And if you're not their ideal client, they like walk away from you. They don't even like that's just rude. So if you think about in person in a networking event, you might talk about some personal things, if your kid graduates high school, you might talk about that. If you just came back from a really cool vacation, you might talk about that. You're not going to share all your deepest, darkest personal stories, but you will share some surface level small talk, surface level things that are about you. So if you think about it that way, and the biggest thing is I find a lot of entrepreneurs are scared that they're going to share too much. And really, I find the reverse is true. I find most entrepreneurs don't share enough. But the way to sort of figure out what that line is think about it ahead of time and say, what will I talk about and what will I not talk about? So, for example, I'm a mother. I talk about my son, but when he was young, I decided I didn't feel comfortable sharing his picture. I didn't feel comfortable sharing his age. I didn't feel comfortable sharing his name. Now, my son's pushing 30 right now, but now I don't talk about him because he told me I'd have to pay a royalty if I shared his photo or his name. So
Yeah.
I don't want to do that. So anyway, but those are things that I've made that decision that I don't talk about details about my son, but I'm a mother. That's a big part of who I am. It's impacted how I run my business. So that's the line. And if you think about what are the personal things that I feel comfortable talking about, and that might be, do you have a hobby? It's personal, but it's not private. There's a path near my house that runs next to the bay, and I walk by there a lot. I take, I think, half the pictures on my camera roll are from like nature shots from that area. So I will post about that because it's something that I love, something that I do just about every day. And so I'll share things like that. People who are, into crafting, people who could be like a certain type of movie, whatever, personal things that are not private and plan them in and talk about them and share them. It lets people see that you're a real person, the person behind the business. You're not just some automaton.
Yes. And also in this world where like AI is becoming more of a thing that people are using all of the time, the more personable or the more authentic that people can be doesn't necessarily mean that you need to be sharing, the intricate details of anything. You could talk about how you've been to your child's graduation without speaking about even high school versus college so that people don't even really know what age they are. You haven't shared the place that they go to school. Um, or, potentially if they're graduating high school, where they're going to college. And occasionally you can also relate it to your business. Like maybe there's kind of like an analogy ish situation that's happening where like you're thinking about your graduation or this part of the business is like graduating this type of thing. You can relate it back in a way, but then there's also the little stories or just the occasional post about it too. It doesn't have to be that like you get on and do a 40-minute podcast about going to your child's graduation, but you could potentially like just mention that you've been somewhere, rather than closing the door and then completely becoming like the work version of yourself cut off and creating a video.
Yeah, exactly. And, the other thing is by being on video and sharing some of these personal stories, everybody has a different personality and different style. Some people are very sweary. Uh, um, I have a little bit of a different from some people is I tend not to swear on camera and in work situations, and that's goes back to when I was in high school. I was a lifeguard, and as lifeguards, we took ourselves very seriously because we were guarding life. And to this day, I can't swear if I'm in a pool because it was like, well, there are children here. We must be. And so I still can't swear in a professional situation. there are people, like there are some people who are very sweary, and that's part of their brand. And if that's who they are, people who are offended by that aren't going to be their clients, because I'm not swearing in a professional situation. If somebody doesn't want that, they get to see that, they get to hear that. Um, there's a coach I know who, when he's in person with people, always hugs everybody. And I was kind of like, that's a little weird. And he said, I've learned over the years that if I hug somebody and they stiffen up, they're not going to be a good client for me, because he's a very touchy-feely. So, I mean, he can't physically hug them on a video, but he can show that kind of touchy-feely, sensitive side. Whereas there are some people who are like, crack the whip, do the business, be the thing. And you can get that, comes across on video and lets people sort of get a taste of what it's like to work with you. If you're a coach, if you're a healer, if any kind of heart-centered entrepreneurs who are sharing their expertise and where you have to develop a relationship with somebody, you really need to get a taste. Like, for example, my water bottle here. If I'm selling this, you don't care if I'm sweary or not sweary, or if I'm mean or if I'm polite. You just want to know, is the water bottle going to hold water, and is it attractive, and is it fun to drink out of? But if you're working long term with somebody to help your health, help with your business, help with your kids, you really want to, have somebody you're comfortable with. And that's like the big power of video, is when you tell the stories and people get to look you in the eye and they get a taste of your personality. That's really what helps people.
Yeah. And I also can see how that has grown over the last, 5 to 10 years. And that I would not be surprised if in 10, 20 years, we really do care where that drink bottle comes from. Like the Amazonification has like the
Yeah.
overcorrection, and we go back to actually, I care about where I buy my pen from, and I care about where I buy, and a lot of that at the moment, there's a lot of talk about, which store you purchase it from. But in a lot of places, it's going to be people caring more about the manufacturing and which company is supplying the local store with that, as well as everything else, just from like a brand values perspective. Um, but in terms of service provider, it is already basically required. So,
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And going back to something you said a little while ago about AI, like I don't know if you've seen this, but I've seen this. You look at an Instagram post and you can absolutely tell this was written by AI and somebody just copied and pasted it. And, full disclosure, I use AI a lot as well, but I start with my voice
mhm.
and then use AI like that. Like, to me, that's one of my secret sauce of marketing, is if I take a transcript of a video and plug it into AI and then say to it, write a standalone blog post, pull 7 quotes that I can use for Instagram, or, I can pull out stuff, but it's starting with my voice, and
Mhm.
then it sounds like me. It's just
Yeah.
like, I'm using it as an assistant to edit things for me and bring it back to me, rather than having a ghostwriter, write
Yes.
it.
Yeah, and I think what's important with that is making sure that the final filter is you, rather than it being, AI just does its thing. We can all tell, even I know people talk about like the M dash or overuse of emojis and things like that. It's not always just those like specific characteristics of AI that people can spot. It's usually just the like monotone, vanilla, human lacking identification pieces. Like you actually don't connect with the writing in the same way. And so as much as people can use it as like a brainstorming tool, and I use it for lots of different things, I would never just like tell AI to write a blog post for me and publish it. That's just not, it's not the way for connection. And so even with video, if you were reading a script, you can still ad lib a little bit, you can morph it, you can just start with bullet points, but like the way that you explain it is going to be inherently you, because you are actually injecting yourself into it no matter what.
Yeah, and that's actually when I'm working with clients, is I really encourage people not to have a full script, because if you haven't been trained to read from a teleprompter, it starts sounding like you're reading and you're like a robot. It's bad. Uh, but if you just have bullet points and maybe some notes, for example, if I know I'm going to share a statistic, I'll write out the statistic because I want to get it right.
Yes.
If I've got 3 bullet points and I have stories, one of the bullet points might be story about Joe, because I know the story about Joe. I don't need any more details so that I can go into the story about Joe. And then it's going to be, even if you made the same video 4 times, it's going to be slightly different every time because as you tell it, you put different emphasis. You might include more details about one area this time than the next time, but it's you. It's not the generic AI.
Yeah, and I've heard many a speaker talk about how they'll like practice their speech 17 million times so that they know it so inherently that they might even have notes just in case they get thrown off their track, but they don't need to refer to them too much because they already know it inherently to the point where they can just give it kind of like off the cuff, and hit all the points that they want to without necessarily looking at their notes. But you can also add almost a little bit of authenticity by checking your notes when you are saying a statistic, because people would hope that you wrote it down accurately. And so you were definitely saying it accurately because you're referring to your notes. But I would literally do that. Like, don't be afraid of like, oh, well, I had to check the number, so therefore I have to re-record it or something if you're not live. It's not that kind of not that kind of a thing, but also you can actually add credibility by visually doing something, rather than cutting it out or re-recording.
Well, and the other interesting thing is I've been seeing data and like anecdotally and actual research that's showing that a less than perfect video that's not so perfectly edited and polished actually performs better than the flawless video with the great cuts and then this transitions and all the funky tools. And I think it's because we are so inundated with advertising that our brain, if it's really slick and really polished, our brain just goes advertising, and then our blinders come on, we go to the bathroom or get a popcorn or whatever it is we do when the advertisements come on. And so if you stumble over a word or have to check your notes or pause or sneeze or whatever it is, it actually people, okay, oh, this is a real person. They're really talking. This wasn't, an advertisement and highly polished. I've even seen Tony Robbins, who you think about, he's been doing videos since back when you had to have VHS to watch video. I've seen him hold up his cell phone and talk to the camera. So if it's good enough for him, it's good enough for us.
Definitely. And I think too, I mean, there's things about it being real in terms of it's not perfectly lit or anything like that, but you can also have great production value and still be authentic. It's just about, doing what feels real for you, but also not setting certain expectations. Like you can record a video in your car. You can do it when you're out and about. You can hold the camera and it not be like perfectly steady. You can just sit down at your computer and like there's shadows or whatever. It's fine. As in the same way that like you can stop and use your drink bottle or, it's not like I'm talking too much with my hands. I need to re-record that. It's just, well, that's who you are. And you're going to talk with your hands in real life.
Yeah.
So let's just do it.
And the more you do videos and the more you get comfortable at it, the easier it will be to be authentic. When I first started doing videos, I would put on fake broadcaster Andrea voice. Do you remember the old Mary Tyler Moore show? And whenever Ted Baxter would go on camera, he would get this deep booming voice. And then when he was off, well, that's what I would do. And I like wasn't intentional. I would just do it. And it took me a long time to train myself not to be fake broadcaster Andrea. So sometimes you could do things unconsciously, but that's where doing it over and over, like, doing a video a day for 30 days, you get tired of doing fake broadcaster voice.
Yeah. The only thing is that I actually enunciate myself a lot better. I just make sure I'm talking clearly instead of just like mumbling.
Well, but I mean, that's the difference between if you're in a professional setting and when you're sitting around having a glass of wine with your best friend, you could be a little bit more casual, but you can be the more professional version of yourself. Just like if you took your grandmother to a funeral, you're going to behave slightly differently than if you're cleaning the cat litter box with your kid. It's still you, but it's a little more professional version of you, a little more sanitized version of you, but it's still you. And that's, that's sort of one of the challenges of doing video. It's also kind of one of the joys and one of the fun is finding that balance and that comfort and acknowledging the fact that speaking to a camera, particularly like, you and I are having a conversation, which is a little more human, but when it's just you and the camera, that's not natural. Like that is
Yep.
weird. And I mean, sure, the pandemic and everybody got on Zoom. My mother even knows what Zoom is. Uh, got us a little more comfortable, but it still takes some work and takes some time to get good at it.
Yeah, totally. Um, yeah, I would say for people it's like don't set too high expectations that you're going to be perfect the first time. Even if you are like an amazing speaker, video will still feel different. And also, if you feel a little bit self-conscious on video on the flip side, but then you're invited to be a speaker, I wouldn't be surprised if like it's something about it just being able to look in people's faces is a little bit different too. So,
Yeah.
um and there's a little bit too in terms of sometimes something can feel like friction because you don't know how to do it completely yet. It's not that it's not right for you, because often I do talk to people about what is right for them. Like being a guest on a podcast for some people isn't the right thing for them. And it gives them potentially because it gives them so much anxiety that it's just not a good fit. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they shouldn't try it a couple times. It kind of just depends on how strong those feelings are. So for most people, there's going to be some resistance to doing some form of video.
Yeah, I agree. I used to teach at our community college, the intro communications course, and part of the course was you had to do a speech. And every semester, I would have at least one student come to me at the end of the first class, literally in tears, saying, I can't do it. I can't do it. And if you're going to be in tears because you're trying to do video or you're going to vomit or it's going to stress you out so much, then maybe you should try a different marketing tactic. Because I'm not saying everybody should do it. But if you have a little bit of fear, I still have a little bit of
Mm.
fear before I go live or before I do a webinar. But that fear, if you use it correctly, can make you a little sharper, make you a little better. And it also just shows that you care. So you
Mm.
have to find that balance between I am so terrified I'm going to be sick or have a heart attack or a panic attack, or I'm just nervous.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. So if we give people some little practical steps, where should they start?
Well, first thing for a lot of people, I recommend start with live video. And people look at me like I sprouted a second head on my shoulder because they think live video, are you kidding me? But there's some good reasons to do live video. Live video, you don't have to learn editing, so you don't have to get to that point where, chuck your computer out the window like I almost did. So you can just throw that out right away. That's a whole step you can just avoid. The second thing is think about the last time you watched live television, whether it was the news or the Oscars or a sporting event. The professional broadcasters who went to school to become broadcasters and who do this all day, every day, they're not perfect. They'll stumble over a word and they have a teleprompter. They have people teaching them how to pronounce people's names and they write stuff. Um, they're not perfect. They'll stumble over a word or forget something and they just take a breath and keep going.
Mm-hmm.
So if we accept that from professionals, people are going to accept that from you. So that's a nice thing to start with video, live video. And it also means then that you won't fall into that perfectionist trap of recording the same thing 47 times until you get to the point where you're not even sure how to pronounce the. So that's the first thing is I recommend live video. The other nice thing about live video is if you haven't done it before, there's very real chance that nobody will show up on your live stream because you haven't told the algorithm that you're coming. And if you haven't told people in advance, you're not going to have a lot of people there. So it gives you a chance to practice without a big audience. And then as you get more comfortable, your audience will grow. So that's the first thing, to just get started with some live video. The second thing is to plan. The biggest mistake I see people make is they say, okay, I'm going to talk about X, but they haven't thought about it. So they're they start getting rambling, they go on and on. There's lots of verbal static. Oh, what did I want to say? So if you know what you're going to say ahead of time, and you don't have to write a script, as I've said, but if you know, okay, I'm going to talk about 3 ways to clean a cat box. That's your expertise, is cleaning your cat box. You know, 3 ways to clean your cat box, and you know what each of the 3 ways are, and you know how you're going to end the video, then you can go, all right, I can come do it. And then it's the next thing is, the tendency is to want to look at your own face, whether it's recording on your webcam or recording on your phone. And so what I always tell people is, get a Post-it note, put an arrow pointing to the camera, and stick it right, on the screen to keep you from looking at your own face and looking at the camera. And then take a deep breath, smile, and then hit that go live button, and then just do it and do it again. And if it's really terrible, you can always delete it when you're done. But before you do, remember that story of that client of mine who got a really great client from her first video, and think, is it really that bad? Or is it just I'm being a perfectionist, before you delete it?
Yeah. No, I really like that. Yeah, it just cuts out some of the extra work. A lot of video sometimes is in the editing. And that's when you're gonna be critical of yourself, as afterwards you're gonna be watching it back and going, "Oh, I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have looked to that direction. I shouldn't have da 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 da." And while there is things that we can learn from watching ourselves back, it's not necessarily the way to get us as excited about something if we are editing ourselves and having to listen to ourselves back. A lot of people say the worst thing I hate listening to is the sound of my own voice. Um, yeah, so I like that. And then in terms of like how to break the ice, essentially, is there anything with people feeling maybe a little bit uncomfortable with there being no one live? Anything like that? Any tips for people in those kind of situations?
Well, there's a somebody I follow. I'm actually in a course of hers, who does live videos on a regular basis and regularly has hundreds of people who commenting on her videos. And one day she sent out an email, said, tomorrow at noon, I'm talking about whatever she was talking about. And I'm like, ooh, I really want to learn that thing. So I put on my calendar, showed up at noon, and she started doing her live video. And I was looking at sort of who was watching. I thought, there's 4 of us. There's 4 people. What the heck? Because normally she has 400 comments on her videos minimum. And I thought, oh, that's weird. And then, but I wanted to learn what she was teaching. So I paid it, stayed and learned the thing. And then the next day I thought, that was interesting. And I went back and looked at the replay. And sure enough, there were 400 comments on that video, even though there was only 4 of us. And so the real lesson is, even with live video, 95% of people are going to watch the replay because they're going to show up when they want to show up, not when you decided to go live. So present as if you've got a room full of people watching you, because you don't know when somebody's going to show up and watch the replay. And if you're really, you start right away, you get right into the meat of your presentation, your information, your value, and present as if that ideal client who's ready to buy from you is there. If they happen to watch it an hour later, 12 hours later, 2 days later, they're going to feel like you're talking to them.
Totally. I mean, there are situations where, I've bought from someone or what have you, and I'm watching a live video from 3 months ago, possibly from their last launch cycle or something like that. And this launch cycle, they haven't done it, or they're not up to it yet, or whatever. And it's just as engaging, it's just as interesting for me as if they were currently live. Except that I can see all the extra engagement, I guess, that's accrued over the last 3 months. But in terms of that, it's kind of like, rather than saying like, oh, well, we'll wait a couple minutes to see if anyone else comes on, what that means is that then your replay is going to have a couple minutes of fluff at the start, and so people aren't necessarily going to watch it.
Yeah, and you think if somebody's coming across your video, not because you emailed them and they were like, oh, I must learn this thing, but it's just in their news feed, you've got 3 to 5 seconds to grab their attention. So if you dive into the content right away, today I'm teaching you about this, and people go, oh, I want to know that. Or you
Mm.
start with some interesting hook, like a shocking statistic or, some contrarian view and say, really? What? I must stay and find out what she's talking about. You'll hook people in, which is, the whole point of the hook is to grab people's attention, make them stop and listen to what you have to say. So yeah, always act as if you've got a full house because you never know when somebody's going to watch that video.
I also think that in a way, there's also ways to connect with people when there is only 2 or 3 people on live, and that you can actually see the comments coming through. I mean, if you had 400 people live and they were all commenting, they'd be flying past you so quickly you wouldn't actually be able to respond to any of them. I assume that's never happened to me. But of course, when there's only a couple people, if they're asking questions, you can answer them live. And so there is that element. You don't necessarily have to, if someone asks a question or the chat is um, putting you off a little bit, you can hide it, answer their questions afterwards by replying to their comment or, doing a new video in terms of like replying to a comment type of videos. But you can include them in a way. And so then people feel a little bit more incentivized to show up, live.
Yeah, and what I teach my students is when you're just starting out, like if you're just making your first video, is like I say, I give you permission to ignore the comments while you're live because there's so many moving parts and you're probably feeling a little like deer in the headlights and you're nervous and you get thrown off. So I give you permission when you're starting out to not respond to the comments. And then when the video is over, you can go back and read the comments and reply with your, typing the answer. Or you can say, you know what? That's a good question. I'm going to do a video tomorrow about
Yeah.
that. And then it encourages people to come back. And then as you get more comfortable and as you get more confident, you can start replying to comments. As you get more confident, you can start working into your videos encouragements to engagement where you ask a question, where you even ask people, hey, let me know in the comments. Are you watching this live or are you watching on the replay? That gives you some information, get some engagement. But as you get more comfortable, you can start adding that. But, you have my permission to start with just do your presentation and get through it alive.
Yeah, I mean, if you think of, doing a workshop or something like that, usually the questions would come at the end. But as people do different things, they can check in at different points. So as you become more comfortable with chat, you can not look at it for a certain amount of time and then bring it up and double check in with people and then move on. It doesn't necessarily have to be like either one or the other. You also, if you start answering questions, you don't have to answer every single question. You've been live for 20 minutes and you're still getting questions and maybe you had a hard out or something. You don't have to answer every single question as it comes through and stay live till everything. It's just what are you comfortable with? And then especially when it is a live situation and their comment is there, that you do come back and respond to them at some point. But it doesn't have to mean that your live goes on for an hour when you only intended to be live for 10 minutes, just because there's a lot of questions, even if those are really high quality questions.
Yeah, and you know what? When that starts happening to you, that's a celebration. When you have to leave before people have finished asking questions, that's a fabulous win. And then, of course, that's the time where you can, start then go through the questions and say, okay, ooh, that's a good video title. That's a good video to answer that question and start responding to people, which then, of course, encourages them to keep coming back because they never know when you're going to be responding to them.
Yeah, totally. And they'll get the notification when you respond as well. So
Yeah.
that's all good too. So we've kind of talked about a few ways to make it simpler. Are there any ways that people can make it simpler to repurpose their content as they work with maybe a longer video afterwards?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of different things you can do, and it depends how much tech you want to get into. Um, so I think I mentioned earlier in this interview about that I take videos and I'll take a transcript and turn them into blog posts, and I use AI for that. But you can absolutely, like, if you've made notes for yourself, you can take those notes, turn them into a blog post. I will take the video and embed it in the blog post as well. So you've got that. You can write an email to your list if you have an email list and invite people to watch the replay of your video. If you want to edit it, you can edit it into YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels. If you don't want to edit, take your outline, grab your phone and go, oh, I said bullet point number 1. Grab your phone, speak bullet point 1 into your phone, vertical phone, and then you've got Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts, TikTok, LinkedIn, whatever, and then you can invite people to go watch the original full-length video. So that, lots of simple ways to repurpose a video either with tech or without.
I just love anything where you can put the effort in once and use it time and time again. There's also just the option of, if you are doing launch cycles, that you can come back to certain topics and repeat them. You can record them fresh, but that they were clear questions that people had last time, so you probably want to answer them again. Anything like that where you might not necessarily be repurposing the video itself, but the effort that you put into planning it, and any learnings that you had over that last time you didn't mention XYZ, but this time you want to. Anything like that can just save you like the mental load of figuring something out. You don't need to figure it out 10 times. You just do it once and then reuse it.
Yeah, and of course the other thing too is, like you can repost the same video 3 months, 6 months, a year from now because new people haven't seen it yet, and people who saw it have probably forgotten. Plus, we've all watched reruns of shows we like. I watched courses that I've taken over and over. There are books. Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. I've probably read it 5 times. And I've got 4 different versions of it that other people have added new examples. So repurposing your content, just posting it again so that people can hear it again, or people who are new hadn't seen it before. Absolutely value. People need to hear things over and over again before they fully understand it.
Yeah, definitely. I love that. Well, thanks for this chat. It's been really informative. Made me think of different ways that I need to get back into doing video. I mean, I say need. I want to. That's the thing. I don't need to do anything. I want to. So it's been really good to have this chat. Thanks for joining me.
Well, thanks for inviting me.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Digital Hive podcast. I hope you enjoyed this chat about video marketing and how you can be yourself to make a bigger impact while keeping things enjoyable for you. To find Andrea online, she is at Andrea Stenberg on most channels, but there are links in the show notes too. If you're enjoying the podcast, I truly appreciate it if you could share it with a friend or on Instagram and tag me at Honeypot Digital. To find out more about Honeypot Digital and the marketing strategy and coaching work I do, or to find more marketing resources, head to honeypotdigital.com.